Hey guys, it's Tyken here. I'm back with another video for you, so let's dive right in. Oh, and don't forget to hit the like button and leave a comment. Let me know which manhwa you want to see next. Let's go!
The protagonist's life had turned upside down. He didn't expect to end up like this, using magic and constantly running away. But he had no choice. It was that, or join the GIR. Their hideout this time was a roadside motel, a discreet place for those who couldn't be found. One of his companions seemed tense, clearly worried about the situation they had gotten themselves into. The woman in the group, on the other hand, seemed much calmer. She shrugged, assuring them that her magical protection barrier was still active. No one could enter the motel without her knowing. The magical protection would alert her immediately. But suddenly, something went wrong. The men were startled, not understanding what was happening or who was responsible. The protagonist wasn't just any fugitive. He had already rebelled and made powerful enemies in the wizarding world. And now, he was there, stuck in an interrogation room, handcuffed to a table, completely at the mercy of his captors. The young man raised his head, confused and claiming he didn't know what they wanted from him. The man in the suit approached, placing an emblem on the table. The serious conversation was about to begin. He introduced himself as Agent Theron from the Arcane Regulation Guild, the same organization that the protagonist was trying to avoid at all costs. Theron got straight to the point. The young man was being held on suspicion of involvement in an attack that happened at an academy. The agent explained that a dragon blood was on the loose, and the protagonist was the only conscious person found at the crime scene. The accusation caught the young man by surprise. He couldn't process the gravity of what he was hearing. Then, the agent asked where he was that morning. The answer came with a painful flashback. He was at his own mother's funeral. And something strange happened there. At his mother's funeral, Callum noticed a strange presence. It was a man he had seen before, or at least a type of person he recognized. They were people with an otherworldly aura, almost invisible to others. But to Callum, they stood out in a way he couldn't ignore. He watched the man from afar. The mysterious figure seemed completely out of place at the ceremony, acting with a calmness that didn't belong there. The man's presence was so strong that it caused a sudden headache in Callum, a physical reaction to the energy he emitted. Then, as suddenly as he appeared, the man turned and left, leaving Callum with his doubts and the throbbing pain. This wasn't the first time. Callum had seen dozens of beings like that, a number too large to be just a figment of his imagination. They appeared in the most common places, and one of them was the owner of the academy that Callum attended. The owner, Mr. Shehi, greeted him as always, but Callum saw the truth. A huge draconic entity that mirrored the man's every move. Even a simple handshake was a double experience. Callum felt the normal grip and, at the same time, the phantom touch of powerful claws. Despite the frightening appearance of his true form, Callum knew that Mr. Shehi wasn't a bad person. His strategy was always the same: just do his best to ignore the creature and interact normally with the man. Since Callum's wife passed away, Mr. Shehi had been trying to set him up with all the girls at the academy, something his draconic form made very clear. Despite being embarrassed, Callum knew that the academy owner only had good intentions with his attempts to play Cupid. Encouraged by Mr. Shehi, Callum approached one of the academy's attendees to strike up a conversation. He introduced himself and said that the academy owner suggested that maybe she needed a little help with the exercises. Apparently, Callum's initiative worked. Marie seemed to like the approach and accepted his help with a smile. But suddenly, Marie's body faltered. She completely lost her balance, taking Callum by surprise. Before he could do anything, the young woman collapsed to the ground. Desperate, Callum ran to help her. It was then that a deafening sound echoed through the academy. Armed men invaded the place, and Callum understood immediately what was happening. It was a robbery. The owner of the academy, Mr. Shehi, showed no fear. On the contrary, the invasion awakened an unexpected fury in him. While Callum was trying to protect himself, not quite understanding what to do, the real target of the criminals was revealed. The invaders weren't there for money. They opened concentrated fire on a single person. The target was Mr. Shehi. But, to everyone's astonishment, the old man was blocking the bullets with his own arms, as if they were nothing. That friendly academy owner was much more than he seemed. A powerful energy began to emanate from his body, revealing his true nature. Amidst a scream of fury, the form of an immense red dragon began to manifest, completely enveloping Mr. Shehi's body. And then, he unleashed his full power in an overwhelming burst of energy. The shockwave swept through the entire academy, throwing everything into the air. Caught in the middle of the chaos, Callum could barely process what was happening. It was all too surreal. A throbbing headache hit him. He felt his consciousness fading and fought with all his might to stay awake. His vision began to blur, and the sounds of battle seemed distant. He knew he needed to do something, but the darkness was winning. Gradually, Callum regained consciousness amidst the chaos of the explosion. Fire and destruction were everywhere. The thick smoke and dust filled the air, making it difficult to breathe and forcing him to step back for a moment. That's when he saw Marie, still unconscious and completely vulnerable on the academy floor. Without hesitation, he put her over his shoulders, determined to get her out of there as quickly as possible. Suddenly, a device attached to her body broke, releasing a dangerous spark. A violent electrical discharge ran through Callum's body. The pain was intense, and it came directly from the girl he was trying to save. The damaged device continued to spark, revealing itself to be the source of the imminent danger. Fighting against the pain and exhaustion, Callum tried to understand what was happening. None of this made any sense. A survival instinct screamed in his mind with a single order: get out of the building immediately. But he couldn't. He looked at Marie and knew he couldn't just leave her behind. Ignoring the pain and danger, he focused on his only goal. The effort, however, was too much. Callum fell to his knees, exhausted, but refused to let go of her. Giving up was not an option. With the last of his strength, he tried to get back on his feet, fighting against his own body. And it was in that moment of pure desperation that something changed. A mysterious energy began to form beneath his feet. An unknown power awakened within him, enveloping him completely. A new ability was about to manifest. The power manifested, but Callum couldn't understand what had just happened. He barely had time to process the situation. That's when a sound caught his attention. Someone had approached him amidst all that chaos. The man in the suit, emanating a blue energy, gave a short, direct order for Callum to stay exactly where he was. With a single gesture, the agent unleashed his power, containing the explosion of fire that consumed the place. Callum watched everything completely paralyzed. The level of power he had just witnessed was something he never imagined existed. For the mysterious agent, however, this seemed to be just another day at work. He adjusted his tie as if he had solved any problem. With the immediate threat contained, the man turned around. Now his attention was entirely focused on Callum. His gaze was serious and calculating, assessing the young man and the scene of the disaster. Confused and frightened by everything, Callum begged for an explanation. He felt like he was going crazy and needed answers. Instead of words, the agent simply raised his hand, revealing a strange mark on his wrist. The gesture meant absolutely nothing to Callum, who still didn't understand what was happening. Frustrated with the silence, Callum became defensive. He warned that if he didn't get an explanation, he wouldn't answer anything else. The agent's patience, however, seemed to have come to an end. Before Callum could react, the man attached a containment device to his wrist. The young man was in shock, not understanding why he was being treated like a criminal after everything that had happened. With no time to process, Callum was forcibly taken away by the agent. Confusion and shock gave way to apprehension about not knowing where he was going. Meanwhile, in an observation room, Callum's situation was being analyzed. The agent who arrested him was warned that leaving a magic blocker on a suspect like that would have consequences. The agent with glasses commented, surprised, that Callum was still conscious, something that shouldn't happen with the device activated. The agent with the beret replied with a confident smile. He explained that, contrary to expectations, the device even seemed to strengthen Callum. The young man's reaction to the blocker was a mystery. Not only did he resist, but he seemed to have adapted in a way that no one there understood. In his mind, Callum revisited the moment of the attack at the academy. He remembered seeing Marie in danger just before everything happened. It was in that instant, to protect her, that his power awakened. An energy he didn't even know he possessed emerged to evacuate the other victim from danger. Back in the room, Callum's file was unbelievable. A 30-year-old magic user from a common lineage and with no record. It was something they considered impossible. After the analysis, the agent informed Callum that he was free of any criminal suspicion. However, the conversation was far from over, as there was a next step. The agent explained the standard procedure. Callum would need to be officially registered and undergo a series of tests to assess his powers. The proposal did not please Callum. He didn't understand what it meant or why it was necessary. The confusion only increased. The officer then revealed the truth. Every mage is required to serve the Arcane Regulation Guild. He explained that although Callum was starting late, the rules still applied to him. The decision was not Callum's. The guild had its rules, and the agent was only there to ensure they were followed. But Callum couldn't simply abandon his life. He had a job, clients, a routine that was about to be completely destroyed by this new reality. The agent heard Callum's protests about his life and work. He seemed to understand the situation, but the guild's rules were clear and could not be ignored. Callum asked, with a glimmer of hope, if he had no choice. He wanted to simply ignore all of this and go back to his normal life, as if nothing had happened. The agent's response came without a hint of sympathy. His expression made it clear that Callum's will was completely irrelevant to the guild. He explained the consequence for mages who do not register. They are hunted and eventually executed. The guild did not tolerate renegades. Those words hit Callum like a punch. The reality of his new situation was brutal and terrifying. There was no escape. Having no other option, Callum was taken to a testing chamber. He realized that this was, in practice, a forced recruitment, a tyranny he didn't even know existed. Nervousness took over Callum. He had no idea what to expect from this test, but he felt that his life was about to change forever. Meanwhile, the guild agents watched him with cold, analytical looks. For them, Callum was just another case to be processed, another power to be cataloged. Despite the fear, a spark of defiance arose. Callum clenched his fist, determined not to be defeated. He would face whatever came next. The main agent picked up a tablet and started the procedure. Callum watched, apprehensive, as the officer prepared to begin the test. Suddenly, a magic circle lit up on the ceiling of the chamber. The agent explained that this sealed room would saturate him with mana to force a reaction and discover his type of magic. The energy from the circle began to flow, filling the environment. The entire room pulsed with a power that Callum had never felt before. Callum stood in the center of it all, feeling the mana run through his body. The pressure was immense, but he stood firm, waiting for the result. The agent watched the process with professional calm. He had seen it dozens of times and was just waiting for the data that the test would provide. Callum's vision began to blur. The mana saturation was reaching its limit. One of the agents reported that the test was almost over, but for Callum, each second felt like an eternity. The mana saturation was too much for Callum's body, and he passed out at the same instant the test ended. Upon waking up, Callum heard the agent's voice, who confirmed that he had finally regained consciousness, as if nothing had happened. Still dazed, Callum sat up and asked if the experience he had during the test was normal. He needed to understand what had happened to his body. The agent's response didn't help much. He said that the reaction was atypical because of Callum's age, and that they took advantage of him being unconscious to finalize the process. That's when Callum noticed a strange mark on his wrist, something that definitely wasn't there before the test. He couldn't believe it. While he was passed out, they marked him without his permission, as if he were property. The agent then revealed the truth. That was the mage mark, and the test proved that Callum was a rare spatial mage. To Callum, it all sounded like a big blow. He refused to believe that out of nowhere, he had become a rare and powerful mage. Realizing he had no choice, Callum asked if he could at least go home to sort things out before being taken away. At that moment, a new agent entered the room. The man with glasses introduced him as Agent Sen, the officer who would be responsible for Callum during the next week until his full integration. Callum tried to be polite and introduce himself, extending his hand, but Agent Sen didn't even take his eyes off his cell phone, ignoring him completely. The lack of respect was instantaneous. The first impression Callum had of his new officer couldn't have been worse. Already in the car, on the way to his new destination, Callum tried to understand his situation. He asked what exactly a spatial mage did in mandatory military service. Without looking at him directly, Sen answered curtly. Spatial magic had no attack power, so his function would basically be transportation. A simple pack mule. Callum then asked what Sen's specialty was. The agent revealed that he was a pyromancer who fought on the front lines, but also had notions of aeromancy. After the brief explanation, Sen turned his attention to his cell phone, making it clear that the conversation was over. Callum, however, was still processing the information, full of doubts. Ignoring the agent's indifference, Callum broke the silence. He needed to understand the basics of this new world to have any chance of surviving. Sen began to explain about the different worlds that provide mana to the planet. He revealed that each of these worlds corresponds to a specific type of supernatural being. He listed the first races: vampires, shapeshifters, and other terrifying creatures that dwelled in the shadows of the world. The list continued, mentioning beings like fairies, dragon descendants, and even sea monsters. There were 5 in total, but Sen knew there was an obvious question missing. And Callum asked exactly the question he expected. What was the 6th race? He was beginning to understand the complexity of this universe. The conversation was interrupted by their arrival at their destination, a modern house that would serve as Callum's base. Inside, Sen handed Callum a laptop with a simple order: that he study the basic manuals contained within. The device was marked with an unknown symbol, a sword, inside a mystical seal, the mark of the organization he was now forced to work for. Before leaving, Sen warned him to prepare himself, as he would need him soon. And with that, he left Callum alone with his new and intimidating task. Alone, Callum dove into his studies. The first lesson was about the nature of magical energy, which was divided into 2 categories: mana and vis. The manual explained that mana was the ambient energy, an external source that mages could access to cast spells. The amount of information was overwhelming. Callum felt completely unprepared, as if he were learning basics that mage children already mastered in kindergarten. Despite the discouragement, he pulled himself together. There was no time for lamentations. He needed to learn, and fast. Determined, he decided to start with the basics, picking up a pen to try a simple exercise. It was the first step of a long journey. After studying the theory, Callum concentrated, ready to put his first spell into practice. He needed total focus to feel the energy around him. He channeled the mana from the environment, trying to use it to move the pencils on the table. Little by little, an energy began to form, responding to his command. Only the force was much greater than he expected. The energy shot out uncontrollably, scaring Callum, who still had no idea how to measure his power. Despite the scare, the spell worked. Somehow, he managed to use that raw energy to fill out the guild's registration forms. Not a subtle method, but it solved the problem. He then reflected on his decision. Joining the guild as a mere recruit could be the perfect excuse to practice his skills openly without raising suspicion, but the mark on his wrist reminded him that his situation was different. He wasn't just looking for training, he needed to understand what was happening to him. Before committing, he decided to research the Arcane Regulation Guild thoroughly. He discovered that it was a secret organization that brought together the most powerful people in the world. Callum suspected that such a powerful group would certainly have dark secrets. He couldn't simply become another cog in that machine without knowing the truth. And it didn't take long for his suspicions to be confirmed. He found an alarming fact. The mortality rate for recruits was over 50%. The discovery shocked him. This was not a training opportunity, but a game of Russian roulette with very little chance of survival. He understood why. The guild leaders, the archmages, lived for centuries and ensured that everyone was under their control. For them, you either served or you didn't live. The guild was a gigantic bureaucracy, a system made to sustain itself, where the powerful used the novices as disposable pawns to maintain their status. If he joined, he would just be another face in the crowd, a number in a fatality statistic, completely forgotten. At that moment, Callum made his decision. He wouldn't be controlled by anyone. With a gesture of pure rebellion, he rejected the idea of joining the guild. While Callum sealed his fate with an act of defiance elsewhere, Agent Theron rested, completely unaware of the problems his new recruit was about to cause. After rejecting the guild, Callum wasted no time. The decision was made, and now it was time to put the plan into practice. He wasn't going back. He knew that disappearing was the only option to escape their control, and he was determined to go all the way. To disappear off the map, he would need resources. He knew that a single mistake could put the entire guild on his trail, so he needed to be careful. The young man filled the bag with all the money he could grab. With everything ready, he opened the door, ready to start his new life as a fugitive. But the noise of the door gave him away. On the other side, Agent Theron found him. His expression made it clear that he wasn't expecting this. Callum froze. He had been caught red-handed. His entire escape plan was falling apart before it even started. Without hesitation, the agent moved forward to stop him from escaping. But Callum was faster, jumping through the nearest window. Theron couldn't believe the rookie was trying to escape right under his nose. The agent's frustration exploded. That kid wasn't going to humiliate him like that. Enough talk. Theron unleashed his power, determined to capture the fugitive at any cost. Callum ran into the middle of the crowd, trying to blend in and disappear. He just needed to get out of there as fast as possible. Breathless, he looked back, realizing the enormous disadvantage he was at. He barely understood how magic worked, let alone how to fight against it. Meanwhile, Theron analyzed the situation. He assumed that, to escape so quickly, Callum must be using some kind of mobility spell. Theron decided there was no point in running on foot. If the kid used magic to escape, he would use magic to hunt. Energy gathered in his fist, ready to be released. With a surge of mana, the agent launched himself into the skies, transforming into a living projectile to reach the fugitive. The chase had just leveled up. He cut through the air at high speed, closing the distance between him and Callum with each passing second. The young man looked back, and cold sweat ran down his face. He wasn't just being followed, he was being hunted by something he could barely comprehend. Theron's patience was gone. He thought that kid was a fool and that he better have a good excuse for running, otherwise he had just made an enemy for life. The agent's determination was absolute. He wouldn't let that kid escape, no matter what it cost. Theron reflected on the fate of a rogue mage. Callum would be hunted by the guild's strongest and most dangerous agents, people even more powerful than Theron himself. He hovered over the crowd, considering the possibility of calling for reinforcements. If the kid was really trying to desert, his superiors needed to be informed of the situation. But pride spoke louder. Letting that newbie escape was out of the question. He dove towards the street. No, he would solve this himself. It was a matter of honor. With a silent impact, the agent landed right in the middle of the crowd, a few feet from his target. But Callum didn't stop. He burrowed even deeper among the people, using the crowd as a shield for his desperate escape. For the agent, however, the crowd was irrelevant. He moved with supernatural agility, completely ignoring the human obstacles in his path. And then, with a victorious smile, he announced the end of the chase. The kid had nowhere left to run. Callum's blood ran cold. The hunter was right in front of him. The escape had come to an end. The agent shouted that Callum couldn't escape. Desperate, the young man plunged back into the crowd, trying one last time to escape his relentless pursuer. The agent's patience was gone. He wasn't there to talk or explain anymore. The hunt needed to end, one way or another. Callum felt the danger approaching from behind, but didn't dare stop running. The people on the street felt a sudden gust of wind, but didn't understand where it came from. They didn't see what was happening right above their heads. It was then that Callum realized something terrifying. No one else on the street seemed to react to the man in the suit. It was as if he was invisible to everyone except him. The agent moved like a ghost, a blur of energy that passed through the crowd unnoticed, closing the distance in seconds. Frustration and panic took over Callum. He was at his limit. In an act of desperation, he looked at the window of a store next to him. A risky idea came to his mind. It was his only chance to throw off the hunter. For an instant, the plan seemed to work. The agent stopped in the middle of the street, looking for his target, not understanding where he had gone. But the distraction was short-lived. The agent located him again in the crowd. Too late. The agent's hand approached, ready to end the escape, and with a firm grip, he held him. The chase had finally ended. Callum had nowhere left to go. The agent turned Callum to face him, making it clear that there would be no more escape. The young man was completely surrendered, but the moment the capture materialized, Callum's eyes widened. He wasn't looking at the agent anymore. He saw something much worse approaching. In the midst of the confusion, Callum's bag fell to the ground. The capture had been so sudden that he didn't even have time to react or defend himself. The agent grabbed Callum tightly, annoyed by the sudden change in the situation. He was no longer in complete control of that confrontation. And then, a third person appeared, picking up the bag that Callum had dropped. The agent was no longer the only threat on the scene. For the rest of the world, nothing abnormal was happening. People passed by without noticing the invisible fight, trapped in their own lives. The agent's patience ran out. A sinister energy began to emanate from his hand, revealing that he was not an ordinary human. Somehow, Callum managed to escape the confrontation. Now, his only goal was to disappear as quickly as possible, hailing the first taxi he saw. Inside the car, he kept hidden, trying not to draw attention. Every second counted to increase the distance between him and his pursuers. He gave the driver clear instructions to take the back roads. The plan was to get off the radar and avoid any chance of being found. The plan took him to a remote location. It wouldn't be quick, but by dawn, he'd be in the middle of nowhere, far from anyone who might recognize him. He found a pilot willing to take him, closing the deal for the riskiest part of his escape. Freedom was just a flight away. Already in the air, Callum knew the new clothes were just a temporary disguise. To truly disappear, he would need a much more drastic change. After landing at his secret destination, he said goodbye to the pilot. The first phase of the escape was complete, but he needed a new look to guarantee anonymity. In a random bathroom, he prepared for the next step. The makeover was essential to erase his old self and become a ghost. He started by cutting his own hair. A new dark color would be enough to complete the transformation and make any recognition difficult. Each strand that fell into the sink was a piece of his old life being left behind. From that moment on, Callum, as the world knew him, would cease to exist. With the transformation complete, he looked at himself in the mirror. He was no longer Callum. It was a new face, a new chance. A confident smile confirmed that the first step of the plan was complete. With his new appearance, he entered a discreet establishment. It was time to formalize his new identity and erase the last traces of who he used to be. At the counter, an orc greeted him, asking how he could help. The place seemed to specialize in peculiar services. Callum, now acting as someone else, explained that he needed a mundane identity, a common document that wouldn't raise suspicions in the system. The orc wasted no time and got straight to the point, stating the price for that type of service, 2,000. Money wasn't a problem. He immediately pulled out the amount, showing that he was prepared and serious about the deal. A short time later, the service was completed. A new document was issued in the name of Chase Hall. Callum's old life was officially buried. With the identity in hand, he felt satisfied. That would be enough to start over. The plan was working. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Callum's escape was already causing a huge problem. 3 agents discussed what happened, clearly frustrated with the operation's failure. One of them tried to justify himself, explaining that he had only placed spells on the doors. He never imagined that the prisoner would be crazy enough to jump out the window. The agent with glasses, his superior, was not convinced. To him, there was no magical residue. It just seemed like a common and poorly planned escape. The pressure was enormous. He knew that Archmage Duval would not accept this failure, especially since she planned to start the boys' training the next day. The third agent, a man named John, seemed to find some humor in the situation, which only served to irritate his colleague even more. Annoyed by the mockery, the agent with glasses decided that since John was so calm, he himself would be responsible for giving the bad news to the boss. Agent Jan's confidence disappeared instantly. The mere idea of having to face Archmage Duval's fury was enough to terrify him. Meanwhile, in a secluded mansion, the news of the failure was about to be delivered to the person no one wanted to anger. Agent John tried to explain himself to the Archmage, assuring her that all available resources were being used to find the fugitive. But the excuses were not enough. The Archmage's magic tightened around his neck, a clear punishment for his incompetence. Every second was agony, a reminder of who he was dealing with. She, however, didn't seem moved at all. There was something about the story that didn't make sense to the Archmage. Suddenly, the magical pressure disappeared. John finally managed to breathe, but the relief was short-lived. His superior's gaze was more frightening than any strangulation spell. Archmage Duval questioned the idea of Callum wanting a normal life. To her, no one with so much power would choose not to use it. He wasn't a civilian. He was a rogue mage, and with a new attack, she made her frustration very clear, throwing the agent to the ground as if he were nothing. Fallen and helpless, John could only observe the Archmage's overwhelming power, understanding the magnitude of the mistake his team had made. She then gave an ultimatum. It was for Callum's sake, and especially for Agent John's own good, that he be found as quickly as possible. For if she had to use her own resources in the search, things would get much worse, especially if Callum Wells had really decided to become a traitor. The threat hung in the air, sealed by a look that promised severe consequences for everyone involved in the failure. Far from all this fury, Callum drove towards his destination. A new look, a new beginning, and the hope of finally disappearing from the radar. He arrived in a small, quiet town in the Midwest, the place that seemed perfect to hide from the magical world that hunted him. Only someone was already waiting for him. A local sheriff and a mysterious woman watched him approach, questioning if that was the man they were looking for. Callum approached with a calculated smile, confirming his interest in the property. He needed to act like an ordinary buyer without raising any suspicion about his true identity. The sheriff introduced himself as Arthur Langley and pointed to the woman beside him, his daughter Jessica. The reception was friendly, but Callum knew he couldn't let his guard down. He maintained the persona of Mr. Hall, his new alias. On the outside, he was just a young man looking for a quiet place to live. Inside, every second was a test for his disguise. However, behind his dark glasses, Sheriff Langley was analyzing him with a serious and penetrating expression. That wasn't the look of a simple small-town cop. They sealed the meeting with a handshake. The first step of the plan was complete. He would be invited to see the house. Inside the property, the sheriff showed him the rooms while Callum feigned interest, evaluating every corner not as a home, but as a possible hiding place. Jessica then commented that he seemed too young to be retired. An innocent question, but one that could easily break his entire charade. The comment was made with a smile, but for someone in Callum's situation, any questioning about his past was an immense risk. He quickly made up an excuse, saying that he wasn't retired, just taking time off for health reasons. A convenient lie to justify his sudden appearance. Apparently, the story worked. The sheriff and his daughter seemed satisfied with the answer, without asking any more uncomfortable questions. For Callum, it was perfect. The less they knew, the safer he would be. He had finally found the ideal hideout. The next day, already settled in the new house, the reality of his situation weighed on him. He had the money and the refuge, but the real battle was just beginning. He knew he couldn't stand still. He needed to master magic at all costs because it was only a matter of time before an enemy named Gar found him. The memory of the last attack still burned in his mind. He was caught off guard once and barely survived. That couldn't happen again. Callum immersed himself in his studies, devouring ancient texts. Theory said that space mages were limited, but he refused to believe it. There was more power to be discovered, and he would find it. While studying, Callum came across a monumental obstacle, a name that seemed to block all his progress and forced him to rethink his strategy. To learn about space magic, it was impossible not to go through Archmage Duval. The fact that she was the only authority on the subject only showed how absolute Gar's control was over everything. Callum then remembered that his first time creating a portal wasn't from study, but from pure accident. It had been an act of subconscious will. He had manifested that power in a moment of desperation to protect someone without even understanding how, an ability born out of necessity. But now, the situation was different. He needed to make it work on purpose. The time had come to test if he could finally control that power. He focused, gathering all his energy and preparing to force open a passage. The young man tried to replicate what he did in the past, but the effort seemed in vain. The magic wasn't responding as he expected. Nothing happened. The first attempt was a total failure, and frustration began to weigh on his mind. But Callum didn't give up. He took a deep breath and, instead of forcing it, decided to try in a more instinctive way, taking a step forward with confidence. And this time, it worked. Without hesitating, He crossed the dimensional rift he had just created. He emerged on the other side in the backyard of his new house. The teleportation had been a success. A smile of relief spread across his face. He did it. The distance was short, but for a first conscious attempt, it was a gigantic leap forward. He looked at the house, now a short distance away. The power he had sought for so long was finally beginning to manifest under his control. The achievement only made him more determined. If he could do this, what else would he be able to accomplish with that power? The possibilities were endless. Later, he relaxed a little. That was just the first step, but a vital step in his preparation for the inevitable confrontation to come. After the success with teleportation, Callum took a moment to relax. That advancement was important, but it was just the beginning of a long road of training and preparation. Except even in the shower, his mind wouldn't stop thinking about his new abilities. Suddenly, a small dimensional rift opened in the shower wall. A hand reached through the portal, breaking the tranquility of the moment. But it wasn't an attack. It was just Callum, using his power to get the shampoo he had forgotten. A very practical way to test his new abilities in everyday life. Later, already dressed, he continued his training. He focused on creating a vis sphere, one of the first things a mage child learns. He managed to form the energy sphere with some ease, feeling the power vibrate in the palm of his hand. However, Callum knew that he wasn't an ordinary mage. His powers didn't come from formal study, but from a different and more chaotic instinct. So, he changed his focus. Instead of creating pure energy, he used his power to manipulate gravity, making small stones float around him. It was an unorthodox method, but it worked. With a gesture, he launched one of the stones forcefully against a tree, proving that his control was real and dangerous. On Sunday, he took his training to another level. Sitting in the forest, he began to meditate, trying to feel the world in a different way. Callum focused on sensing the mana in the environment, using it to expand his perception beyond his normal senses. His awareness stretched out, traveling from the forest back to the house where he was staying. He could see inside the place, even with his eyes closed. The range was still limited, but the ability was developing. That's when he felt it. There was someone else there. A presence was moving inside the house. His eyes snapped open. The calm of training vanished, replaced by total alertness. He wasn't alone. The presence that Callum detected wasn't a threat, but rather a neighbor who had shown up on his property. He went out to greet her, confirming that her name was Jessica and casually asking the reason for her visit. The woman explained what had brought her there, trying to strike up a friendly and relaxed conversation. Callum seemed relieved, laughing at the situation. The tension he felt moments before completely dissipated. After all, it was just a normal interruption, a neighborhood chat like any other. They continued the conversation for another moment, an exchange of pleasantries to keep up appearances. The woman seemed a little awkward, but the interaction was brief and apparently harmless. After a quick and strange goodbye, Callum said farewell, believing that the matter was closed. But then, he felt it. A faint magical aura lingered in the air, exactly where she had been. That wasn't normal. He didn't think twice. Callum shot towards the location. The young man understood the danger right away. It was residual magic. If someone from the guild sensed that in his backyard, his disguise would be over. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a woman in a white coat was reporting something with a worried expression. She was addressing a man in a suit, an authority figure who listened attentively to every word. The man processed the information in silence, his face impassive. The news seemed to be exactly what he expected to hear. The agent was analyzing the report he had just received. The information confirmed his suspicions, and he needed to understand all the details of the situation. The researcher explained that she only noticed the problem when checking the mana supply. The protection barrier had dispersed an absurd amount of energy, 100 thoms. She analyzed the device, still processing the magnitude of that power. Such a large energy expenditure was something rarely seen. The reading left no doubt. The level of power involved was much greater than expected for a simple incident. The agent then commented that that amount of mana was far greater than what a common novice mage could even control. The researcher pondered this, remembering that, despite the massive expenditure, there was no record of any spells being cast. The mystery only deepened. For the agent, however, this was not a mystery, but a confirmation. He was on the right track to find who he was looking for. Meanwhile, Callum prepared to deal with the magical residue left on his property. He needed to act fast and erase any trace. He focused his energy, the vis, until he felt he had enough to carry out what he planned. With the energy prepared, he positioned a small ball bearing on the table. It was the centerpiece of his plan. Immediately, the object began to react, absorbing the magical energy around it with impressive intensity. The plan was working. With that method he found online, Callum could use the bearings to completely erase any trace of his magic. That would be a great help to stay off the guild's radar. In just a few weeks, his progress with magic was already remarkable. He should be happy with his progress and with the solution he found, but a strange feeling bothered him deep down. Then, the painful memory surfaced. All this escape and all this progress started on the same day he buried his own mother. He was moving so fast, running and training, that he barely had time to process everything he had lost. But the memory of that day was unavoidable. He was back at that cemetery. It wasn't just his mother, it was his parents, and Celine, his wife. He had lost everyone he loved. The memories of happy times were now just painful fragments, reminders of a world that no longer existed. Back in the present, Callum looked at the sky and wondered if Celine would have liked that place. It was a thought that haunted him, but he shook his head, pushing the sadness away. It wasn't the time for that. Being stuck in the past wouldn't get him anywhere. The pain turned into determination. He needed to pull himself together and focus on what mattered, surviving and understanding what was happening. The first step was to blend in. To do that, he needed to know the city, to understand how things worked there. He entered the local cafe, a good place to start observing and gathering information. He acted casually, exchanging a few words with the waitress as she suggested something from the menu. Everything seemed normal, until, suddenly, he felt something. A strange energy, subtle but unmistakable to someone who knew what to look for. His senses sharpened, revealing a hidden structure that no one else could see. There was something hidden right there, beneath his feet, and in the basement, a magical presence pulsed in secret. That small cafe hid much more than it seemed. While investigating the energy in the basement, Callum realized that the magical presence was greater than he expected. However, something didn't fit the signature he felt. He concentrated, trying to locate the exact source of that pulse. His first impression was that it was some kind of animal, maybe a dog, but he was terribly wrong. The creature that inhabited the basement was not a simple animal. It had the size and shape of a man. Absorbed in his investigation, Callum was caught off guard by a much more mundane presence. Someone had approached from behind, interrupting his concentration. It was the local sheriff, an older man who greeted him casually, but with an air of someone who watches everything carefully. The sheriff tried to break the ice, praising the steaks of his niece, Clara, the cafe's waitress. An apparently normal conversation for a new customer. Clara smiled at the compliment and walked away to take care of her duties, leaving the two men alone at the counter. Despite the smile, the sheriff maintained an observant posture. His visit didn't seem to be just for the coffee. Callum tried to keep his composure, but the unexpected arrival of the law made him tense. He knew that any slip-up could be fatal to his disguise. The sheriff's gesture seemed friendly, but the sudden physical contact only increased Callum's suspicion. The conversation was about to change its tone, and then the real reason for the visit came to light. The sheriff warned him about strange faces wandering around the area, asking Callum to contact him if he saw anything unusual. With a hint of irony, Callum replied, reminding the sheriff that he himself was once one of those strange faces. A question that tested the officer's intentions. The sheriff admitted that he had indeed investigated Callum when he arrived, but over time, he realized that the young man was not like those from the big city. He put his hat back on, his tone becoming more serious. The distinction he was about to make was important. The people he was looking for were of a different kind, a type of problem that didn't belong in that place. The warning was clear. The city was under a new and dangerous threat. The sheriff's warning about the new threat in town put him on alert, and suddenly, a terrible suspicion took over Callum, making his blood run cold. A recent memory flashed in his mind. A woman with a friendly smile handed him a bag, a gesture that seemed innocent at the time, but that now took on a new meaning. That's where the piece fell into place. He understood that if he was being tracked, the origin of the problem was that object he was carrying. But that wasn't all. He noticed an almost invisible mark on his wrist, something he had never noticed before. Already in a safe place, Callum examined the mark under the light. It wasn't a simple stain, it was a symbol, a magic rune. The shape of the symbol left no doubt. It was a tracking sigil, a magic collar implanted in his own skin. With no time to waste, Callum focused his own energy. He needed to rip that thing out of his body no matter how. The magic responded, grabbing the core of the spell. He began to pull, feeling the thing detaching from his flesh. The pain was unbearable, as if they were tearing his soul along with it. But he couldn't stop now. With one last effort, the object was completely torn out, a small sphere of darkness that pulsed with the tracker's energy. Exhausted and panting, Callum felt the immediate relief. The process almost exhausted him completely, but he was free. In his trembling hand was the small device. He finally got it. Freedom, however, came at a price. On his wrist, an open wound bled in the place where the mark once was. Now, only one thing was missing. Callum threw the tracker on the table, determined to erase any trace of it. The object was consumed by fire, disappearing forever. For now, he was safe. But the question remained, who was hunting him? After getting rid of the tracker, Callum returned to his research. He desperately needed to understand who was hunting him and why before it was too late. Suddenly, a knock on the door made him flinch. His heart froze. He wasn't expecting anyone, and unexpected visits were the last thing he wanted. He slowly turned towards the door. Apprehension took over his face. Could it be them? Had the hunters found him again? Using his keen perception, he was able to see through the door. It was two uniformed men. They seemed to be from the local police. It was the sheriff and his deputy. The official visit only made everything even more suspicious. Callum opened the door, forcing a smile to hide his nervousness. The sheriff wasted no time and said he needed to ask some questions. The officer's expression was serious and intimidating. Sweating cold, Callum asked if he had done anything wrong, already imagining the worst. The sheriff stared at him for a moment and got straight to the point. He wanted to know where Mr. Hall was around 3 in the morning the night before. The question reminded him of that night. He was in his room, but the truth was much more complicated than simply sleeping. Because that morning, something dark happened. A memory of a violent transformation that he could never confess to the police. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Sheriff Langley himself confirmed crucial information to a colleague. His family, the Langleys, were indeed shapeshifters. The revelation weighed heavily in the air. The woman seemed to understand the gravity of the situation and what it meant for recent events. Back at the interrogation, Callum remembered a warning the sheriff gave him at the cafe. He realized that the visit wasn't random. The sheriff wasn't just investigating, he was testing. Callum remembered the advice Sheriff Langley gave him. He asked the young man to call if he saw anything unusual posing as an ally, but now it all seemed like part of a well-planned trap. That night, after the strange event, the only thing Callum could think about was hiding for a while. He needed the dust to settle before anyone found him, but the silence of the early morning was broken by a noise coming from the window. The sound woke him up instantly, putting him on alert. Outside, a sinister energy began to manifest, distorting the reality around the house. The noise in the bushes confirmed that he wasn't alone. Something or someone was approaching in the darkness. He grabbed a flashlight to investigate, but found nothing, just the sound of crickets. For a moment, Callum thought he might have imagined it all. The tranquility outside left him even more confused. Had it just been a nightmare? Only the moment he let his guard down, he felt an eerie presence right behind him. Panicked, he ran and closed the curtains, trembling with fear of whatever was there with him. And now, back in the present, the sheriff wanted to know exactly where he was at 3 a.m. that night. The officer noted every detail with a serious expression that left no room for lies. He expected a concrete answer. Callum replied that he was sleeping, but the sheriff cut to the chase, asking if he had any proof to confirm his story, like a security system. The officer's insistence made Callum understand the gravity of the situation. He began to wonder if he would need a lawyer. The sheriff tried to calm him down, saying that he wasn't exactly a suspect, but at this point, Callum knew he was cornered, and the officer's words brought no comfort at all. Pressed, Callum admitted that he had a security system, but it was a very simple one. It only recorded who came in and out without any cameras to prove he was home. The truth is, he couldn't risk having cameras around. It would be a mistake that would ruin everything. After all, with how often he practiced his magic in the backyard, any recording would be irrefutable evidence against him, exposing his greatest secret to the world. The sheriff then revealed the reason for all that pressure. It wasn't just any case. Someone had broken into Old Man Hardy's house. The news caught Callum by surprise. He didn't imagine that the investigation was about something so serious happening right there in his neighborhood. With the information on the table, Sheriff Langley got straight to the point and asked if Callum had, by any chance, seen or heard anything suspicious. Visibly nervous, Callum denied seeing anything, but his hesitation was almost a confession that something was wrong. At that moment, he remembered the strange noise that woke him up during the night, a sound that he had ignored but that now seemed much more sinister. He realized his mistake. He was so focused on his own supernatural problems that he didn't even consider the possibility of an ordinary criminal lurking around. Deciding to tell a half-truth, Callum admitted that a noise woke him up, but told the officers that he thought it was just a large animal. He claimed that was all he knew, hoping that this little bit of information would be enough to divert attention and suspicion away from him. The sheriff thanked Callum for his cooperation, noting the information and saying they would be in touch if anything new came up. The interrogation seemed to have come to an end. Already moving away from the house, the other officer asked Sheriff Langley if he had really believed the young man's story. Langley admitted that it was obvious Callum wasn't telling everything. However, his years of police intuition told him one thing: that boy was not a murderer. Inside the car, the sheriff put on his seatbelt, deep in thought. He had a strong feeling that things in that town were about to get a lot more complicated, and Sheriff Langley's feeling was correct. Things in the town were already getting complicated, and he went straight to the source of the problem. He confronted the leader of the newcomers, making it clear that he would not allow any kind of murder in his territory. It was a direct and blunt warning. The long-haired man, however, responded with total disregard. He said that if one of the sheriff's mundane critters suffered a tragic accident, it wasn't his problem. But Langley wasn't there to discuss accidents. He stated categorically that the victim was killed by a vampire. The memory of the crime scene was still fresh in his mind. It was the reason he was there, so determined to bring justice. The sheriff pointed directly at the man, saying he could smell parasites like him from miles away. The accusation was clear. The vampire just shrugged, as if the accusation was a mere annoyance, something that didn't deserve his attention. He kept a mocking smile on his face, treating the whole situation like a tasteless joke. But behind that apparent calm, his gaze revealed the true threat he posed. Losing his patience, the sheriff slammed his hand on the table. He stated that he knew the culprit was one of his vampires and that he intended to hold him accountable for the crime. With a smug grin, the vampire simply challenged him, saying he would love to see him try. That provocation was the last straw. The sheriff's anger was visible, the tension in the air about to explode, and then, in the blink of an eye, the vampire acted. Without even getting out of his chair, he hurled the sheriff against the wall with absurd force. Langley got up furious, ready to retaliate, but was immediately restrained by someone else in the room. With a victorious smile, the vampire ordered them to get the sheriff out of his sight, showing who was really in control of the situation. The news was serious. The woman informed the sheriff that one of the town's mundanes had been killed, and worst of all, they didn't have enough people to prevent the culprits from attacking again. Frustration took over Sheriff Langley. With his hands tied, the only thing he could do was feel the anger grow in the face of that helplessness. Without many options, the sheriff decided he needed outside help and made a call to a contact named Chester. The weight of the situation was evident. Langley felt the responsibility on his shoulders, exhausted with the problem that kept growing. During the call, the sheriff explained the delicate situation they were in, hoping that there would be a solution on the other end of the line. Chester's response was a mixture of relief and concern. He would send reinforcements but made it clear that they could not help officially. Chester also suspected that the problem was bigger than it seemed, confirming the sheriff's worst fears. And then, Langley revealed the true scale of the threat to his colleague. It wasn't an isolated case. At least 5 other cities were facing the same situation. The condition for acting was clear. They needed to catch the culprits red-handed. Only then would they be allowed to retaliate with full force. The call with Chester came to an end, but the instructions were direct. The responsibility for getting the proof fell entirely on Langley. After hanging up, the sheriff turned to his colleague and gave the order. She was to keep her eyes wide open. Any slip-up could be fatal. They knew what to do, but not who to fight against. And it was at that moment that a new figure emerged, bringing the question that was on everyone's mind. Who were the real targets?